Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Photo Mishmash. This one being broadcast live April 17th, 2019. I've got a story of drone disconnect. I've got a robot shooting a wedding, firmware 3.0 dropping for multiple cameras, and rumors of a super cheap full frame camera from Canon, even cheaper than the EOS RP. We're going to talk about all of that. And I'm really excited to welcome a new guest and today co-host to the show, David Carr. David, thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's really good to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm still kind of getting my bearings on how to do this. So I'm kind of looking at my computer screen and I've got all these windows open and I'm looking at all the clutter on my desktop. So I'm a little distracted, but I'm here and thank you for having me.
Sure. Well, many of you might be wondering where Steve is. The last picture I've seen of Steve, I'm sharing now on the screen. He happens to be holding a bunch of Grammys that I know aren't his. And I think that might be illegal. So he could be in jail. He could just be dealing with sick grandchildren. You pick the story you want to believe the most. But interesting twist on this story. David Carr, these are your Grammys.
Yeah, they are.
Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah. So, I was in a band for 24 years. I don't know. I'm still new to this whole photo world in a lot of ways. I mean, I've been in photography for 6 years, but previous to that, I was the drummer in a band called Third Day for 24 years, which is like over half my life, right out of high school. And we're kind of like a Christian rock band was sort of the category we fell into. And, back when rock and roll music was still a thing, which doesn't seem like it's as much a thing now, but that's what we did. And we had a really successful career. We had a lot of really amazing things that happened throughout. And one of those was we won some Grammys. So that's a really cool thing. I don't think about them a lot. I don't think about that a lot. I mean, I'm not trying to sound falsely humble, but what's great is when somebody like Steve comes over to my house, he reminds me about how cool they are. So I get to sort of, bask in that glory for a moment, and then I put them back on the shelf and get back to real life.
It's pretty awesome. I mean, again, what those represent, being at the top of your game in that genre, is just really, really cool. And you've transitioned into photography now, kind of leaving that rock world behind.
Yes. Yes. So I started doing photography about 6.5 years ago. I was on the road a lot, and we would travel all over the country, all over the world, really. And I needed a hobby. I needed something to do out there on the road. And I didn't really get into it just to have a hobby, but I had always sort of dabbled with cameras and I loved the sort of the technology side of it all, which I know a lot of people can relate to that. It's kind of this beautiful marriage of art and technology. And I kind of celebrated the tech side of it first, kind of backwards. But then I began to really love the art form and started to really learn. I was like, if I go get this great camera, I wanted to get a good camera, a full frame, just wanted to get something that I really felt like I could arrive with. And I got it. And I was like, I'm going to learn how to do this. So I just started reading up and studying all these different books and videos and just kind of learning as I went along, and getting out there and shooting a lot and making a lot of really terrible photographs, but each time learning a little more. So it's been really fun to transition to that.
Nice.
Over the last 6 years.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And I can attest that you are actually now a really good photographer. I've seen
I appreciate
your work.
that. Thank you.
For those who don't know, David came along, is a fellow instructor in the McKay Photography Academy. And we've been on a couple of trips, but the big one most recently was the Antarctica trip.
Yes. And I'm still coming down from that. I don't know about you, Toby, but that was just an insanely just amazing trip. Just, it's so hard to even describe it to people how cool it was. And I've had to learn to like reel it in and not talk about it so much, because I know people probably get tired of that. So I try to just pepper it into my conversation every now and then. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same. We are very lucky in doing what we do and getting to travel to a lot of different places as part of our job. But Antarctica is just several levels above so much of that, and it's just awesome. Very cool. Very cool. All right, well, let's dive into the show. This is that weekly show where I sit down with somebody today, David, and we chit chat about the week's photography news. We also haven't welcomed the chat room yet. There's a bunch of fantastic people in the chat room. Most of them are photo enthusiast members. We thank them for their membership. We thank them for being part of this awesome community. And I'm just going to pitch. That's right. A pitch to you, Penn, for just a moment. If you're watching this and you're not part of this community, the thing that I love the most, there are a lot of different bits of it that all come together to make an awesome education kind of photography education place. But it really is the community that is first and foremost in my mind. It's a group of people that are friendly and gracious to one another. And I don't see that other places online. Certainly you have helpful groups here and there, but you always end up with this snark or that snark, or like, David said, you're starting out, you don't quite know what you're doing. You don't quite know what questions to ask all of the time. And you're scared to ask what is the dumb questions. And, there's just none of that in our group. If you've got a question, we got an answer for you. And I really, really appreciate those who are hanging out with us today and those who make this whole kind of thing possible. If you want to check out more information, you can go to photorec.tv/pen. That's the shortest URL I can give you, photorec.tv/pen, to learn more. We've got a bunch of free gifts. If you sign up for a free 10-day trial, you get a bunch of free gifts. And again, here I am. You've heard David's dulcet tones. We're not trying to get you kind of people. You can sign up. Check out the free gifts, stick around for longer than 10 days if you want, or just cancel. We're not going to charge you. You're not going to have to cut up your credit cards after you give it to us. It just doesn't work that way. I always end up going down rat holes, but the other day I was watching John Oliver's Last Week Tonight show. David, have you ever watched that?
I think I've seen it a few times, but not really.
Really kind of humorous, but deeply researched, kind of dives into various topics. And the other day Sorry. One about people making money off people stuck in mobile homes. And it just was again and again and again, these people that are just making a living off of doing really now. But I'm really proud to be part of this kind of educational community. And the way I'm making money is helping other people. It feels good. So
yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. I mean, that has been the best part of working with you and with the McKays. Being able to be in a position to watch people grow in their photography and to learn. I really love teaching. I think I've always loved it, even though I've never really formally taught. If I have some knowledge or if I've learned how to do something and somebody asks me, how do you do that? I really love to explain it. Because I like to see them get it, and I don't know why. That's just a thing for me. So this has been a really great fit, being a part of these tours, and just like you said, it's not all about, but most of it to me is about the community and that sense of camaraderie, and the fact that we all get to be together and talk about this thing that, quite frankly, most of our family members don't really want to talk about with us. We get to sort of nerd out for a week or so, and it's been incredible.
Yeah. Well said. All right, we're going to move on. Just just a quick reminder, things that have gone out either on this channel or through the Photo Enthusiast Network over the last week. One is the new firmware 3.0. I kind of teased this at the beginning, has dropped for the Sony camera. I put out a video about that. The big headline feature of that, it's kind of a dual headline feature. Well, let's say three items. Let me just tell you what's in the firmware. New intervalometer, or I should say intervalometer. This is something that Sony didn't have in this latest version of their cameras, which was very frustrating since they had it in earlier versions. Why are you going to take out something useful, Sony? Well, they put it back in. It's kind of bare bones, but it's certainly better than nothing. Watch my full video if you want to know more about that. Enhanced IAF, basically real-time IAF. If you've been following along, you say, well, didn't Sony already have that? Yes, but now it does a better job when it loses the eye of picking it back up, and you don't have to assign it to a custom button if you don't want to. And it works pretty well. And the headlining feature, I think, for some people, depends on whether or not you have a pet, it depends on what kind of pet you have. The Animal IAF. So now I tested it on 2 Boston Terriers, and it worked very impressively. Not perfectly, but very impressively. Lots of reports of it working quite well on many dogs and cats, but it really does depend on the light level and, of course, how well that eye is visible. People have been testing it on all manners of things. Scott Faulty, who some of you remember has been associated with this channel in the past, we've been talking. He's on safari. He saw it work on giraffes, but not elephants. He couldn't get it to work on cheetahs. I feel like there was one other animal. Some people perched birds. So, it's varied, but right now, reliably, Sony just says cats and dogs. You got any pets, David? You got any?
I do. I have multiple pets. How long is the show? We have a dog, a golden doodle. She's like huge and fluffy and lovable. Yeah, we have a dog, we have a cat, we have a rabbit, we have a bearded dragon, and we have 5 chickens. So there you go.
But you don't shoot with Sony, so you can't test on any of those guys.
That's right. I can't. No, I mean, I don't think I can't relate.
Just for background, you're a Nikon guy and primarily shooting with the D850. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I kind of switch between the D850 and the D5. I love them both for very different reasons, but yeah, that's what I shoot with.
Yeah, nice. All right, but let's see. The other thing that I teased was I took an anniversary road trip with my lady this weekend, and the reason I want to tease it is because, well, I realized that it is a pretty fantastic way to bring along somebody who might not be as into photography as you. I actually kind of said that opening line in a little pitch in the video, and then Chris was like, "Well, I like photography too." But okay, she likes photography, but does she want to stay out until midnight photographing the stars? No, but you can drive these little. We rented a little camper van. Actually borrowed a little camper van from Peace Van Rentals here in Seattle, and we just had a lot of fun. That's the first time I've camped in like a camper vehicle, in many years. And it definitely makes me want one. I feel like that's a kind of common thing, David. Photographers have a dream of getting a little van or Vanagon or Airstream or something and setting out, or photographers that are interested in landscape photography, I should say, and setting out across the country, sleeping under the stars, photographing such and such.
Yeah, absolutely. My wife and I talk about it all the time, getting an Airstream someday. We actually, about 9 years ago, when we moved into the current house that we're in right now, we came, I don't want to say we came close, but we really talked heavily about kind of selling it all and just getting an RV and just traveling around the country with our kids. And that sounds really romantic and wonderful, but I think about a month or two in, the reality would kick in. But who knows? Maybe it'll happen at some point.
It depends on whether you take all of those pets, I think. You might have to make some sacrifices there.
I know.
Leave the chickens behind.
Yeah, we didn't have chickens then, but we certainly would not be taking chickens with us now.
Yeah. It was really fun. And check out your area, or if you're coming to the Seattle area, if you live in Seattle area, check out Peace Van Rentals. Actually, 80% of their rentals are people flying in from out of state, and it's just cool because they stock the van with everything you need. You just have to throw in your clothes and the food you want, and off you go. So it's pretty cool. Definitely looking into the possibility in the future. Let's dive into the second part of the show. Actually, you know what? I want to do my drone story because I teased it earlier this week in the newsletter. And I'll make it quick, but just, every time I'm flying the drone, I'm a little nervous about what might happen. And David, you've got a Mavic Air?
I do. Yes.
Yeah. And pretty much every time I fly it, I'm a little nervous, and that's worn off. And less nervous and less nervous and less nervous. And these days when I'm flying it over land, I'm like, it's fine. I know if I crash it, I know where to find it. And truthfully, this isn't actually even mine. So then there's that even a little bit less of a level of this is on loan to me. But I still, don't want to reach out to DJI and be like, I lost your drone. So on this road trip, I wanted to capture some footage of the van driving through these cool little valleys. And we went down this place we went through the Yakima River Valley. Beautiful kind of gentle canyon, rolling hills, some a little bit steeper mountains and stuff. And I put it up in the air and it was tracking us. And I was actually the only registered driver for the van, the way it worked out. It's just, so I'm driving, Chris is just kind of monitoring, and she's like, oh, it's disconnected. And that happens from time to time. The remote disconnects from the drone. And usually I just kind of move and it's happy again, or it comes back, and it didn't come back. didn't come back, and there was no place to stop the car or turn around. And suddenly I realized that this plan was not so good. Went over the hill, down under the other side of the hill, so down the mountain basically, and realized that now there was a giant mountain between us. There was no way we were going to be able to connect back to this drone, even if it was a little software fault at the beginning. Now it was definitely because the giant mountain was blocking the view, and there was no place to turn around. And I thought, whose bright idea was this? So the very first place I could find to turn around, about another half mile down the road. By now, we've been disconnected from the drone for probably about 5 minutes. In the flight earlier, I had set the remote to be the return to home location because I wanted it, when it got low enough battery, to go ahead and chase back down to the car. And I wasn't sure this time if it was set back to remote to home or its launching point. To make a long story short, we turned around, drove back up over the mountain, and it wasn't reconnecting. It wasn't reconnecting. And I was getting pretty nervous. And then finally it did. And its view was the gravel on the side of the road where it had taken off from. The moral of the story is, one, don't allow mountains to get between you and your drone, even if you think you know what you're doing. And two, always take off from a safe location, so that if it has to land on its own, if I had hand launched from some bouldery area, which I do sometimes, or if I had launched from the edge of the road thinking, I'll catch it when it comes back down or something, it would have been run over. But luckily I happened to launch from the very kind of far edge of the shoulder away from the road. And there was a truck sitting there, and he just kind of smiled at me as I picked it up. Reviewing the footage, it just hung out in the air after it disconnected for about 2 minutes. And then it spun, flew back, and landed so nicely at its spot. So
that's scary.
It was quite scary. And then Chris was like, "Whoa, on a scale of 1 to 10, what was your fear factor?" And I was like, about a 7. And I thought I was going to impress her. And then she was going to be like, "Oh, that's just a 7, huh?" Or she was like, "Oh, really? That high?" I was like, "Well, yeah." She's like, "But it's not your drone." I was like, "Yeah, but I don't want to write DJI and be like, I lost your drone because I drove through a mountain and didn't think about it."
Yeah. It's funny. If I could share a quick story about my drone,
Certainly.
Inspired by your drone story, and also inspired by you, Toby, because, when I first got my Mavic Air, I had never done anything with a drone. I had never flown one. I really didn't know the limitations, and I didn't really realize how pro they've become. Even like a little Mavic Air is pretty awesome technology. So hanging out with you on the Oregon coast last August, I just watching how confident you were flying this drone out, without even being able to see it with your eyes, just being able to just fly it away and just kind of trust that it's out there, and just watching the little camera, the little video. So the other day I was like, "Oh, I'm going to just fly mine. I'm not even going to look up in the sky. I'm just going to like fly it and trust that it's fine. I'm going to look at I'm just going to fly it just by looking at the video on my phone." And I saw my son jumping on the trampoline, and I was like, "Oh, I think I'll come land close to him, or just kind of come down." And, little did I know, there are just all these branches between the drone and the trampoline. And, all of a sudden the video got really shaky and kind of thrown all over the place. And I heard all this noise in the backyard and ran back there, and thankfully it was fine. Just tore up a couple propellers, but that's it. Your heart kind of stops, because it's like, this is expensive technology, and you don't want to just crash it.
Yeah, it's very true. So did it land after crashing through, or did it stay kind of in the air?
It stayed in the air. It kind of like did its maneuver where it was kind of like erratic and going all over the place. And then I kind of was able to bring it back towards me and then land it safely, but it didn't land itself.
Gotcha. You landed. Yeah. They are, exactly. They're expensive bits of technology, and they are quite capable and fairly robust in many cases, but you don't want to do something stupid and be like, "Oh, there's $800," or you have to write an email to somebody and be really embarrassed and probably never get any loans from them again.
See, there's nobody for me to write an email to if I'd done that. It would just be
the wife, "Can I get another drone?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just one correction to your story. You said how confidently I flew it,
Oh
how
yeah,
confidently I seem
yeah,
inside.
yeah.
Inside, I'm dying a little bit,
You're a good
especially with
actor.
that drone in Oregon. That was the big Inspire.
That's
Uh,
right. I couldn't remember
that's
the
a lot of
name of
fun.
that. Was the Inspire. It was. I was inspired by the Inspire.
Yeah. Well, good, good. That's what it's supposed to do, I think. All right, let's dive into one of our favorite parts of the show. And David, I know you have guest judged on the monthly reviews in the past. That is a service that we provide for Photo Enthusiast Network members. They
Yes.
get to submit images. They get judged by a very serious rubric with lots of constructive feedback. And
Yeah.
each month, the winner is picked and receives a fantastic prize from Bay Photo.
Hmm.
This is much more relaxed, and really we're focused on Lightroom tips and tricks. And again, this is if you would like to see your images here and you're a Photo Enthusiast member, well, you just should submit them. If you're not a Photo Enthusiast member, well, then you should become one so that you can get feedback, Lightroom tips and tricks on your pictures. So I'm going to share my whole screen here, and we've got a couple of pictures that we want to talk about today. And we're going to be kind of quick because I do have a hard out today. We need to be done this show at 3 p.m. or very close to it. So we might not spend quite as much time as we usually do on these pictures. But first up, we've got two from Vince, who just got them in at the last minute. Good job, Vince. And you've got two black and white pictures here. Let's maybe we could talk about them both together. And this is Vince yourself. And did you do self-portraits? Because I'm pretty impressed with your focus here, if these are self-portraits.
Definitely.
And maybe let's give people a quick background. David, we talked about you being a photographer, but what do you spend most of your time photographing when you're not, gallivanting around Antarctica?
Yeah. Well, when I'm not in Antarctica, no, I that again, that was like the pinnacle of photography, photographic experience for me. But yeah, in the day to day when I'm shooting, I am doing a lot of headshots and portraits and a few weddings here and there. I'm still kind of tiptoeing into the wedding scene. I like it. I actually do like it. Some people think I'm crazy, but I do enjoy it. There's something about the rush of it all and that sort of adrenaline of like, I have to get this right. I don't know why. I do enjoy that, but I'm not sure I would enjoy that 52 weeks a year or every weekend or whatever. But yeah, I'm working with people a lot more in my photography, and it's interesting when I share something from like the landscape world or something with traveling with McKay Live. I of course, you get tons of likes for that stuff because people love wildlife and nature, and they just, some of those photos in Antarctica to me just kind of took themselves. But when you're shooting, working with people and photographing people, it's it's not as instantly rewarding sometimes because it's very personal to the person you're photographing. So I'm enjoying that challenge though of trying to make people feel better about themselves and make them feel confident and just show that beautiful side that everybody has, that sometimes you just have to work it until they're happy, until they feel good about it. So that's been really fun for me to delve into in the last several years.
That's really cool. And to tease a story that we're going to touch on a little bit later in the show, I'm going to get your take, David, about robots photographing weddings and whether or not you're worried about losing your job or losing that aspect of your job, since it is
I'm
just
intrigued by that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so we got these two shots up here for Vince. He's dabbling with jazz profile picture, black and white, and since we've got two, and he kind of, I think, asking for tips and tricks. The first thing I'd like to say is, which one do we like better? And I just asked the chat left or right, but you know what? I'm actually not sure how this feeds to the chat. So trumpet up and point it at us, or trumpet down. Would you let us know in the chat room? David Carr, what do you think?
Okay, just looking at the two images, I definitely I like the first one with the trumpet pointing down. I just see more detail in it. There's more happening, more going on. I do like the second image, but I would see it as part of like a series or just part of telling the story. I don't know that I see it as the story, but there's something kind of, I don't know, just kind of dramatic about that first one that I really love. And plus being able to see like you know, his cheeks kind of like puffed out. He's like playing, you know, that looks really cool to me.
Yeah, I was really kind of going back and forth. I kind of liked the mystery of this, and over
Hmm.
here, I felt like the hands were grabbing my attention more than I wanted.
Mm,
But your points, I like the left. I like the
mm,
left because
mm.
not only do we have the hands, which I think are an important part of trumpet playing, but we've got part of the cheeks and we've got part of the lips and all of that that combines together to make sounds with a trumpet. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like this one. So let's talk a little bit more about just this one and any tips and tricks. I think I would bring highlights down just a little bit. Um, I don't want the hands to be quite as bright, maybe not that much. Very subtly difference. Did I even make a difference? A little.
I agree though. I think that actually helps a lot, and maybe it's a matter of brushing the left hand, just brushing just a darker brush on it, because it does kind of steal some of the show as far as the light goes. But I think it's something that can definitely be worked with.
Yeah, yeah. And then I noticed I brought the shadows up just a teeny tiny bit. I don't want to see, I think the shirt starts to appear. I don't really want to see that. So that was another thing. But I do want just a little bit more
Yeah,
in the kind of areas where you can start to see detail. I would brighten it just so you can see just a little bit more detail. But otherwise, I think that's quite nice.
definitely.
Yeah. Nice job, Vince. All right, we're going to move on from something very. Oh, that's weird. Hold on. It is confused. Oh no, we might have lost that picture. See how it says shows the thumbnail from Adam? This is the new one. Let's
Mm,
go. That's been submitted, but the big picture is this one. So I'm not sure why Lightroom is so confused. Gosh,
mm.
that's weird. Oh, probably because it has the same name. Probably because it has the same name. Let me try to fix that really quick because that's annoying to me. So I'm going to go to the grid, and over here, I'm going to ask it to synchronize this folder. And it's thinking about that. And now if we double click that, okay, seems to be better now. Go to develop. Oh, and it still switches back. Oh, Lightroom. Okay, well, this is from Adam's Hero 5 with a dome feature. I think it's the Polar Pro, Adam. If you're in the chat, correct me if I'm wrong. This is a kind of cool over-under shots that you can get with a dome, a bulbous dome that goes on the front. I tried this in Antarctica with mild success. Out of many, many attempts and some really cold hands, I have about one shot that I think is interesting, maybe two. I just really love this kind of peak above and below the surface at the same time. Anything jump out at you that you would suggest, David? And I know you're seeing these pictures for the first time, so you could throw it back to me if you want.
Yeah. I mean, God, that's a pretty cool image. You know, at first glance, I sometimes I just try to imagine, like, okay, if this was my image, if you know, if I shot this, what would be my go-to reaction? You know, in editing. Maybe just a hair more contrast. I don't know. It seems a little hazy, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because it's just kind of is hazy. The color of the sky, the way I'm seeing it, is almost airing on purple, or there's some purple up in the trees, which it's not. I mean, I'm nitpicking here because I think it's a really cool shot. But yeah, I think did you just add some contrast? Yeah.
I did add a little contrast, and
Yeah.
I think I'm going
I,
to try to just get this into Photoshop so we have real editing tools, not the limited ones, because of whatever weirdness that
yeah.
Lightroom is. So I'm
Sure.
just going to throw the camera raw filter on top, and then we'll continue talking. I think that was a good suggestion. So yeah, I'm going to up the contrast a little bit. And then, yeah, seeing that little bit of a purple in the sky, you know, the dynamic range of the GoPros, it's not fantastic.
Oh yeah, sure. I
So
mean, it's again, it's you know, we're nitpicking here, um, but overall, I think it's just it's a very unique image. The feet coming up out of the water, I think that's really cool. It's like this is something that's really happening. You know, it's not like it's just an art piece or something. It's like capturing a real moment, but in a creative way.
yeah, yeah. I agree. And I think there's some really nice balance here between these kind of fun feet right here and then diving towards this cliff here. And underwater, we can't see anything more, but we know that the shore is over in that direction.
Mhm.
Other suggestions, the GoPro gets a little noisy in the lower light. I'd throw a graduated filter on that really ups the noise reduction. We can soften that down there in the water, maybe even reduces the sharpness a little bit, brings clarity down. What else do we have here? Oops. Not really seeing much happen with that noise reduction there.
Hmm.
And I don't know why. But we can also, clarity, maybe dehaze down a little bit. That fights it back a little bit. And the other thing you might want to do is you could see some of the light rays coming in. You might want to further emphasize those. I showed that in the last show. You could come in here with these little graduated radial filters and just kind of fake it again. Let's do it. I'm showing my inexperience editing in Camera Raw, even though it's so very similar to. I just want this thing to be very similar to inside Lightroom. Basically, you can then turn this and stick this over here and just decrease the exposure a little bit. And you're just kind of re-emphasizing those rays. And then you can right click and say duplicate. You get another one. You can stick it wherever you want. I'm overdoing it so you can see the effect, but you want to be kind of nice and subtle there. And the other thing that I did back in the basic panel is, say okay to that. Oops, was reduce that purple that David, you mentioned, and the magenta too. Both of those kind of evened out the color in the sky a little bit more.
That helps a lot. I encourage everybody to take a look at those color sliders from time to time, and don't go crazy with them, because you can really mess your image up, or and you won't even realize how much you've kind of jacked it all up. But you can really kind of tweak some really nice spots in your photo using those. And sometimes I'll even change the hue a little bit, just the color a little of things, just because there are complementary colors. There are certain greens that go better with blues, and there's certain blues that go better with reds. And so sometimes you can just sort of like finesse those images to where the colors are just spot on. Again, do it sparingly, do it subtly, but don't be afraid to dive into that stuff. You can. I actually went through a bunch of wedding photos the other day, and they were all like yellow. They had this yellow thing, and it wasn't just a white balance fix. It was actually pulling the yellow slider down, and I was amazed at how much better they looked. I mean, just night and day. So
nice.
Use those to your advantage.
Yep. I just was curious, the color it's very colorful, almost a little bit too much in my opinion, and that can be distracting at times. And so I wondered what a black and white would look like. And I don't know. I think it's a viable option as well. It feels a lot different, but it feels a little bit more, I think, impactful.
I like that, actually.
Yeah. Thanks. All right. Nice shot, Adam. Thanks for submitting.
Very cool.
We're in the name of time. We're going to move past his other image. We keep passing on that one. Sorry, Adam. We'll get it someday. He said that was okay. And now we're on to Maggie, who is a fairly new pen member and was just on our Southwest trip and captured this Grand Canyon sunset. How do you feel about lens flares, David?
Well, I mean, I'm not opposed to them. I feel, I don't know. I can take them or leave them. I understand people who don't like them, but to me, it's just an artistic choice. And I don't know.
Yeah, I think they're fine. These over here, totally okay. There are times where that works well. Might be a little much starting to get over into this area, but I really don't want to get into editing those out. That's something that we actually have a ton of pen material on, how to edit things out. But this is going to be tricky in this. Well,
that's going to take a lot of work.
Yeah. But I think you would be better. Don't worry about these little hexagonal guys, but these kind of bright green UFOs shooting off this way, alien lasers, I think I would spend some time. They keep pulling my eye over. Everything else is so kind of warm and lovely and sunset feeling. And then we have pew pew lasers in the eye.
Yeah, it's kind of a Star Wars kind of thing going on there. So
Yeah.
No, it's actually a really cool shot. When you ask me if I like lens flares, I do, but I agree with you about those little spots. I feel like they're just maybe a little too much.
Yeah. Yep. And then overall, we're working with a JPEG from Maggie, and Maggie, you might have already done some editing to it, but I'd warm it up just a little bit more. And now that we're in Lightroom and I'm so comfortable, I might put a graduated filter over the top and warm it up even a little bit more, just to kind of balance that warmth, because the sky up above without that just kind of feels gray until you get down to the exciting portion a little bit further down. And then we maybe bring highlights down a little bit so more of that color can come through. Be careful. You see when I start to get about 88 and we see this weird halo here, and the colors just start to appear unnatural, in my opinion. So I'd back that up just about to where you wash it out. Yeah. But otherwise, I think this is a really nice image. You might consider taking out this bit of sticks and rocks here, or, and this is, David, I think you and I talked about this on the Antarctica trip. I sometimes, you've already kind of done it to a 4x5. I sometimes think about the Instagram crop when I'm shooting, and that bums me out more than anything. But if you go to a 4x5, you go in a little bit tighter. Now you only have a little bit of that branch to remove, only a little bit of that lens flare. I think that is still a strong image.
Yeah. I struggle with the format thing sometimes because and lately I've just kind of been cropping to wherever I feel like cropping. I don't care if it's an exact 2x3 or 4x5. It is tricky when you want to post on Instagram. There are some apps where you can sort of keep the format. It's always the tall formats that struggle on Instagram. There are some apps where you can keep that format and just put white bars on the side. And I've done that at times if I really feel like the information on top and bottom is critical. But lately I've just been, the analogy I use, and you've heard me use this many times, Toby, and several of you have heard it before, but I always think of my photographs as a painting. Like if this was a painting hanging on a wall, or if this was a painting that I was creating on my own with a brush and on a canvas, I don't always keep things within the confines of just, let me rewind what I'm saying there. I try to think of it like, where would I put things in this painting, and how much sky would there be? If I was going to paint this, would I have that much sky? Would the sky look this way? Would I have this branch over in the right-hand corner? And, the answer is not, yes or no. It can be either or. But you just start, if you step back from it and look at it as like a painting, and like, let's pretend that you could move anything you want anywhere, and you can make this however you want it to be. Now, granted, we don't want to do that all in post. That you can start to overdo a photo. So when you're shooting, try to start thinking that way, like looking through your viewfinder and seeing things in a way that's like, does this kind of look like the painting I'm wanting does this look like the picture I'm wanting to paint? And if it doesn't, maybe if I move over a few feet to the left, to the right, up, down, or just, way back, just try to figure out where the photograph is in that moment. And then there are some times that it just is what it is. And then you take it into editing and you just kind of fine tune it. But I always think of it that way. And so what you're doing is it's the same kind of thing. It's kind of figuring out where's the sweet spot for all the information in this photograph. Where's the sweet spot for it? And what's going to tell the story the best?
Yeah, I like that. What's going to tell a story the best? So while you're talking, I just made a couple more. I did quick edits. I wouldn't but they actually kind of turned out okay. But you need to do a little bit more there and a little bit more there. But I think getting a little bit tighter works. All right, we're going to move on. Kevin Walk, you've also got a sunset picture, and this is pretty epic.
Yeah.
I do see a good bit of noise up in the sky. I don't know if that's coming through for you or not, David Carr, but
I actually see it when you zoomed in. Even I've got a tiny little window open, and I still see it. So
yeah. So I think I feel like you got some really nice material to work with here, but you may have pushed it a little bit further than I'm comfortable pushing it. And so I'm going to. That actually looks kind of neat. See, what did that do? Oh, that added the leftover added the tint a bunch and exposure. But I'm going to actually decrease the clarity a little bit soften those clouds. I'm actually going to decrease the saturation just
Hmm.
a little bit. My goal generally in editing is not to ever take it beyond something that I think it could have been in reality. So it's got to stay
Mhm.
within reality with a little dash of like, ooh, that's nice. That's nice. And it's actually this, I think this is the tip that I learned from Steve is to bring that clarity back down on the sky, just kind of soften the clouds, especially when you have really kind of crunchy foreground, because it sets up that nice feeling of contrast of crunchiness in the foreground and soft and pillowy clouds up above.
I like that a lot, what you said about, taking it what did you say? Taking it, to reality, but not further than that, or however
Yeah.
you worded
Yeah.
that. I think that's a really great, um, guide,
Mhm.
because it's so easy to start making it look like this HDR image that's over processed and. But
Yep.
that looks really nice. I really love this image. I love where things are. Um, Again, to use my painting analogy, that looks like something I would paint. The clouds are doing what I would want them to do, and the foreground is it. I don't know. That's just a really beautiful image.
Yep, I agree. I love the colors in here and the amount of texture that we have here. And again, I might back that off a tiny bit, Kevin, but otherwise, I think you've done a really nice job here. Kevin's come a long way. He's been uh, a photographer of what is that name? Feature photographer of McKay Photography Academy. It's where each month McKay Photography Academy highlights a photographer. Kevin has been working with us since I think he was 14 or 15, and now he's in his low 20s. Is that right, Kevin? Do I know what I'm talking about? I have no idea how old you are. I think you're right around 20-ish. And it's just been really cool to watch you grow as a photographer. Maggie, we've already done one from you, and Kevin, that's another one from you. So with the time we've got on this show, we're going to end that there. And I'm going to somehow find this window. Here it is.
Mhm.
And come back to us, and let's talk about a few news stories. Shouters for shouting. I got excited. Let me find my mishmash now. And so first part of the news stories, we usually kind of like do a little gear barf. I've got this gear on the table. Some of it we're going to reference, some of it not. Actually, before we get to any articles, this is why I have a scale on the table. This arrived last week for me to review. This is the Panasonic Lumix S1R. It is a new full frame camera from Panasonic. They're most known for their Micro Four Thirds. I have their GH5. I used to own their GH4. Fantastic video focused cameras. This does a good job video, but it's really designed for photography. But I could not believe how much it weighed.
Hmm.
It is bigger, I think, David, than the D850.
Is it really?
I
I've
really
been
think so.
excited to see that thing, but wow, it looks like a monster in your hands.
Yeah. Um, I actually have teeny tiny hands. Just no, my hands are pretty normal. I haven't weighed it yet. Let me see. With a battery in it, XQD card in it, it weighs almost 4 pounds, and a lens. And a lens. Somebody chat room, wonderful people. Can you look up what is the D850 plus the 24 to 120 weigh when combined together? I'd be really curious to know how they match. But I'll say this about it: my early thoughts. Then I started to use it, and I totally forgot how freaking heavy it is, because it is one of the most well thought out, nicely designed, smart idea cameras I've ever worked with.
Hmm.
I don't want it for a couple of reasons, though. One, because I really don't want to carry around that much weight these days. And two, it still has I don't know if you know, David, Panasonic has gone to this phase detect autofocus system
Right.
that is just, no, am I saying that right? Autofocus from depth. It's
Okay.
just not as good as what we see in the DSLRs or what we even see in the other mirrorless cameras.
Hmm.
And it's fine for static subjects. I think this is in some ways a landscape photographer's dream, but it's just anything fast, anything that it needs to track reliably, it's just not there.
I mean, yeah, it's the benefits of mirrorless being smaller and lighter are now just kind of null and void. And I was very excited to see and hear about this camera. And I'm sure it's great, but I think for anybody that's trying to downsize a little bit, that doesn't sound like it's the option.
No, it definitely isn't. Vince wants to know how much the images weigh. You're a funny guy, Vince. I will say this, it has a neat mode. So it is a 47 megapixel sensor in here. And as far as I can tell, it's a very, very good sensor. I'm very happy with the images out of it. It also has a high resolution mode, though, where it takes multiple images and stitches them together. Are you ready for this? 187 megapixel images. 187 megapixels.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need that. I'm gonna need that for my Instagram feed.
And as far as I can tell, I shot several of them. I'm pretty impressed with them. They're good. So their resolution is 11,000 by 16,000. That's what we're looking at. And it's just the detail there is quite stunning. Again, doesn't work on moving subjects and moving objects and things like that, but I don't know. I teased or I mentioned that my review video about the new Sony firmware, kind of hands-on with it. They're not the only company release a 3.0 firmware. Fuji X-T3 has jumped up to 3.0, and that includes, I had that article open, yeah, right here. We've got some updates to strengthen the accuracy of face and eye detection AF performance. You got a new face select function, faster AF speed for subjects at distance, intuitive operation of the touchscreen, focus frame when eye detection. So a bunch of improvements, including some pretty significant ones as far as focus goes. And I just really, really like that. Good job, Sony. Good job, Fuji, in putting out these free updates that, you know, really make the cameras perform better for no extra cost for the consumer. When's the last time D850's gotten anything exciting firmware update-wise?
Gosh, you know, I can't even remember now. I think sometime in the last 6 months we had an update, but I don't feel like the Nikon updates are usually very exciting. It's stuff that I don't ever use, or it's some glitch or something that I've never experienced. But it is cool to say that you have the latest firmware.
Yep. And that's my experience as well. Nikon and Canon typically release firmware updates that are bug fixes, or in Canon's term, I love they use fixes a phenomena. Just call it a bug. You got to make a big word for a bug.
Yeah, that's funny.
But Canon does have coming. We've got the EOS RP on the table right here. And, oh no, sorry. This already does it, I think. The EOS R is going to get firmware version 1.2, which is bringing eye detection to servo mode, which means that it can use eye detection continuously, whereas it could not before. So good job, Canon, on that, updating these cameras. And let's dive right into this rumor that Canon said they're going to do a cheaper full frame camera. This already kind of blows me away with its price. Yes, they made some significant sacrifices to get to $1,300 for a full frame new camera. We could talk about the sensor not being so new. That's one of the big sacrifices. But still, they got there with good Canon reliability for $1,300, and they might come out with an even cheaper full frame. That's pretty impressive.
Wow.
So it does make sense to me. You know, if somebody had said this to me a year ago, you know, that Canon would be the one to release a super cheap full frame, I would be pretty skeptical. But now thinking about how their mount system is kind of complicated, they've got, of course, in the DSLR world, they got EFS and EF lenses. That's equivalent to your Nikon DX and FX. And then they have their Canon EOS M mirrorless that uses the EF-M mount. That's a very small little mount that covers just the APS-C size sensors in those. Then they've got their full frame mirrorless, which uses the RF mount. And what they don't have is there's no this EF-M to EF-R or F. Yeah. There's no transition for that. There's no adapters for that. There's no way to make that work. So they don't have a cheap kind of crop sensor way to lead into their full frame. So it makes sense to me that they'll say, forget the crop. Let's just go cheap full frame and get people into our system that way. My concern is that people are going to see that full frame. They hear that's where you need to be. And these days, it certainly does still offer some advantages, But a strong crop sensor camera like the Fuji X-T3 has an awful lot of other advantages that I want to make sure people are considering when they buy. So just because it's a budget full frame, that doesn't mean you should jump on it and be like, ooh, an $800 full frame. I'm set to shoot every wedding I ever want to shoot.
Yeah, you know what? I said something earlier about when I first got into photography about 6.5 years ago, and I said something about getting a full frame camera as if that was like the only way to be pro. And I kind of need to rewind a little bit and say, that was just my mentality at the time. And when I see some of the images that people shoot on crop sensor cameras that are just mind blowing, it's really whatever you have to work with and what you know how to do with that is what matters more than anything. I will say there's something cool about the full frame world. There are definitely some differences that you'll notice in the full spectrum of shooting. You'll see where the benefits are here and there, but my gosh, these days the technology, I mean, if an iPhone or any smartphone can create the images that it can create, the crop sensor is no small potatoes for sure.
Pam wants us to talk briefly about the Nikon Z6, Z7 update because it is getting a firmware update sometime in May, which is right around the corner, 2 weeks away or so. There's one of your pets.
Yeah, I'm going to have to mute my mic while you talk.
No worries. And that is coming as well. And so this is exciting. And, this is only good for us consumers when we now have all the major players with cameras, full frame mirrorless cameras out. They all want to have ones that, do what people need and want. And so when one guy is releasing this, the other says, all right, we're going to, up our game and release this as well. I think that is helping to drive this. I also think despite some reservations about the EOS RP, I think it is a good camera for some people, and a cheaper version of it may still be a good camera for some people as well. And that will probably likely pressure the other camera manufacturers to drop these prices as well. Really, these camera systems, they're the hook into their lenses. And so I can totally see that's another reason why I can see Canon saying, okay, look, we're going to offer a really cheap full frame, but of course our RF lenses that you might want to use it on are a little pricey, but you'll pay those and you'll be hooked into our system in the long run. And or you've got the adapter idea, and then you can throw on all of these cheap EF lenses that are out there and have been out there forever. So it's exciting to see where this goes. I think the next, I'm saying this for a couple of months, so maybe the next year to 18 months, I think are going to be really interesting to see whether or not we see more serious firmware updates from these guys, whether or not we see additional models. And Kate also is asking about when are we going to see the pro level mirrorless from Canon. We have rumors of maybe 70 some megapixels, maybe even 100 megapixels. And we'll see when that comes. Yeah.
Interesting stuff, though, to watch this progression into the mirrorless world. I feel like it's reaching a tipping point for sure.
Yeah. And then we tease this, David. You shoot some weddings. And we've got this article in here. By the way, you can see all of these articles that we're talking about at photorec.tv/MMH. That stands for Mishmash Highlights. Roy collects all of these interesting things. Sometimes you send him links that you want us to talk about, like naughty Instagram pictures that we're going to get to at the very end of the show. So if you want to see those, go to that site. And Roy, thanks for putting this all together. But we've got a robot photographer hire now. What do you think about this, David?
I mean, gosh, I'm all for it. I mean, I don't even have to pay an assistant anymore. I can just bring some robots along, and I'm sure it has an app with it though that's going to crash on me in the middle of the wedding, and I'm going to have to, restart my phone. But no, that is just unbelievable. When the robot vacuum cleaners came out, I was really doubtful. I was like, yeah, that's a gimmick. That's just a sharper image kind of thing that just no one's ever going to catch on to. But then they caught on. So I don't know, maybe robotic wedding photographers. The thing is, like, I thought this photography job was one that couldn't be outsourced. And sounds like we might all be fighting for our jobs. What are we going to have, like landscape tours that are just all robots going out? And I don't know. It's amazing to think where we're headed.
Yeah, it is. And just to be clear to people, this is more of a kind of mobile photo booth than anything else right now.
Sure.
It's not being there, catching the critical moments of the kiss or the ring being flipped on the finger, things like that, thankfully. But it does bring up that kind of bigger question that, man, it would be fun to kind of sit down and have this futurist idea. We had another discussion last year sometime about drones holding flashes. And I mean, how far are we from maybe throwing up a couple of drones in the air and the camera communicating with them with the best location for them to be to cast the light you need on your subjects? A couple of years, maybe more. And there is that whole, you so very nicely described about going out and thinking about capturing this as a painting. It's going to be a very long time before robots can really see and the light and make judgments about the light like we are. But in the meantime, I don't know. They could be pretty useful, better than just the vacuum cleaners, especially if you put slightly better than the vacuum cleaners, but not quite as good as the vacuum cleaners that you put the music on. What do they call that? DJ Roomba.
Yeah, DJ Roomba. Yeah, exactly. No, I in all seriousness, it is pretty cool to see where we're headed with this kind of technology. Nothing's going to replace the artistry of a human being. I think that will always be there. But it just, anytime the technology advances, I mean, think about it. We're already at a place where anybody can go out and buy a camera and download, the software or, just subscribe to Lightroom, and it doesn't make them a great photographer, but they can start to produce things that can look pretty good, better than they would have looked, 15, 20 years ago, certainly better than when I was growing up. And so that bar's been lowered so much to where the barrier to entry for photography is so low, but that does not mean that you don't have to still be great and still have to see things as an artist. And so I'm learning more and more with all the cool technological advancements, robots and mirrorless and all these cool things, all this stuff that's happening, all AR and all these things, like none of that can be really replaced with, none of it can replace the human element of seeing things and the emotion that comes from being a human and creating, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I think very well said. Very well said. Steve is fired. You're on the show more.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
He talks about Star Wars and his cute puppy. I mean, it's just, I just kidding. No, that was really well said, and it's absolutely true. And there is always that constant fear of being replaced by these people because they've got a nice camera, but there's just so much more to it than that.
Yes, thankfully.
Yeah. We have a section of the show that we talk about towards the end, where I just pull the microphone down. David, I think you're a little younger than me. I don't know if you remember Muppets where they got pigs from space. This is photos from space.
Yes, I remember.
And then this is actually, I'm pretty sure it's Caleb. You started this, and I think you're in the chat. I saw your name a little while ago. So I think it's really cool that we get to share something that you captured. And photos from space is a loose category. Sometimes it's photos of things going into space. Like Caleb, who lives in Florida, happened to be nearby, put himself nearby to the SpaceX Falcon Heavy launch last week, I think it was. And he titled this "How Not to Film a Rocket Launch" because he got there just a few minutes before it took off. And it's kind of fun to watch him struggle. He was hit severely by the struggle bus as it kind of takes off because it was a lot faster than he thought. And he's filming through a telescope, folks. So his field of view is incredibly small. Keep that in mind. But you can see that early on here, I'm going to jump ahead. And you can't hear his audio as he's struggling to keep it up. But I think it's pretty awesome that we have an amateur rocket filmer within our group, and that he started this whole kind of photos from space thing, and now we get to share something that he actually captured. That's all.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And he's got, you hear the audio in the background telling you kind of what is happening from the actual SpaceX launch stuff. So again, if you want to watch this, there's a link to his YouTube in that photorec.tv/MMH. Or you can shoot How Not to Film a Rocket Launch SpaceX Falcon Heavy Arabsat 6A. Rolls off the tongue. And then we tease this right before we get to our Q&A and we start to wrap the show up. we've got some naughty. Now, see, the problem is I want to show you just this one picture. Hold on, here we go. Let's show this. And I don't want you to see the rest of it. Let me make sure this works so that you get all excited and then you get disappointed. That's how life is. All right. So there we are.
Oh.
First time ever that I've shown what you think is a very nice cleavage shot. I shouldn't have said nice. A cleavage shot. I should just leave my opinion out of it.
Oh,
Sorry. Just went bad. But when you actually see the whole image, there's a little bit more to the story. So this is, and I bring this up not because I just wanted to show naughty pictures and make myself look stupid. This, something that women have to deal with on Instagram. This German actress constantly gets all kinds of ridiculous comments on her pictures, and she got a little tired of it. So she went on this little project where she posted what most people would think at first glance is a cleavage shot. And in fact, it's not. And there's a few more. There's let me go back here. I like this one with the hand.
Oh gosh.
Does it show that better with the hand? I thought it did. So it's gone viral, of course, with lots of people not knowing what they're looking at, what they're commenting on. So just a little fun, just a little silliness to end this show, or not quite end it, but back from cleavage to questions. And I think
could a robot take that photo though? That's what I want to know. Would it know?
Would it understand the irony?
Yeah.
No. So fake cleavage, actual butt shots are safe from robots for the foreseeable future.
I think so. Yeah, we're safe, guys.
Yeah. All right. First question is for you, David. Angela, who is a longtime fan of this show and everything I do, has just jumped ship and is totally a fanboy of you, or fangirl. And she would love to hear you say, "Hi, Angela."
Well, hi, Angela.
That was great.
Is that good?
Angela also wants to know when PenCon is. When are we going to have a little convention get together? And that's a great question. I have no answer for it. I would say come on a McKay trip. I know not everybody can do that, but it is a lot of fun when people who have followed me for a long time come on trips, who know David, who have come on trips. And then, it's just kind of like a group of fun friends traveling together. That's one of the other things that I really like about my job is we work hard, but a lot of times we feel like we're just kind of traveling around with our friends.
Definitely.
George wants to know if I'm going to post pictures of the video of the Mavics return to home. That's a good idea. I could certainly just put up the raw footage and link that out. I should make a video because I've got at least one or two other clips of me doing dumb things. Every time I've done anything bad with a drone, it has been my fault. And in general, they're pretty easy to fly. So I will look into getting that out as a video, or very least a thing. Tim wants to know if I've tried the handheld high-res mode on the Olympus EM1 Mark II. I have shot that mode. I never shot it handheld. I don't think I realized that you could, but it makes sense because, David, I don't know if you know, the Olympus has ridiculous image stabilization in it. You can handhold for 4, 5, 6 seconds even. That's
crazy. I had heard that the Olympus had amazing vibration reduction, whatever, but that's incredible.
Yeah, it is. So that makes sense that they can also do the high res mode. I don't know. I can't remember. I think what's a bummer, and maybe this has changed, when I first tested that EM1 Mark II, it had just come out and Lightroom would not handle the high res files. It had to be run through their own software first. And that also is an issue. My Sony will do not a higher resolution, but a higher detail file. But again, it has to be run through its own software first, which really, that extra bit of workflow, maybe I'm just admitting that I'm lazy, but it's just kind of cumbersome and I don't want to do it. This Panasonic, they're just gigantic RAWs that come right into Lightroom like every other RAW, except they're much bigger and then Lightroom's much slower. Andrew wonders if anybody ever has issues with firmware updates. He has the Nikon D7100. He hasn't added or updated to the latest firmware. He's heard that there's pros and cons. Coming from a Nikon world, any real issues with updating firmware, David?
I've never had any issues with it. I mean, like I said earlier, I don't feel like the firmware updates have been monumental up to this point. I mean, perhaps some of them have, and I haven't noticed. But I've never had any issues with them actually downloading or uploading into the camera. Yeah, it's always seemed to work.
Yeah, yeah. I think there are, in rare occasions, a bug or two for the firmware updates. I've never heard any terrible horror stories, and when they are those bugs, usually there's a subsequent firmware update pretty quickly, or they release instructions on how to roll back. So in general, I think you're safe to update, especially if it's not out that same day. You know, if it's been out for a while, they realize there's bugs, they put out a corrected version, and then that's what you're going to go. You're going to be pretty safe. And connected to that, Vince wants to know about the Magic Lantern firmware, which for Canon folks, that is third-party firmware that adds a whole host of features. I've got older videos about them. They're actually some of my more popular videos because they are a completely free way to add an immense amount of additional functionality to your camera. The downside is it could void your firmware. It really just runs on the SD card though. So if you take the SD card out, it's fine. I've heard stories of people who've had cameras have gone wonky while it's running Magic firmware, Magic Lantern. They take the card out, send it into Canon. Canon fixes it. They don't know that it's been running Magic firmware. So, there could be an issue. There could be. But for the most part, they release as if you're going to their stable channel, not their alpha and nightly builds. They're quite stable. And if you have a Canon camera like the 5D Mark III, 5D Mark II, or some of the older Rebels, it adds some really cool features all built in. So, you could check it out. I think why we hear about it less these days is there are cameras that people can buy that do all of that stuff now. And, back when the 5D Mark II and 5D Mark III was out, it added a lot of really cool video style features to the camera. And that was one of the only ways to get it. There wasn't really other alternative cameras, but now GH5 series, Fuji X-T3. So, if people are doing a lot of that video kind of centric stuff, they're just buying those cameras. Yeah. I think that's it. Tim wants to know, hurting my feelings, just Steve and David. That sounds great. Just you and Steve do a show.
Don't let me run it, man. I would, it would not be fun if I tried to run this thing. No, I think he means with the three of us, right? Is that what he means? The three of us?
I think Three's a charm. Isn't that Three's Company? Is it?
Yeah.
Three's, that was a great show. I'm sure we would be able to pull that off just as well.
Oh, absolutely.
We'd have to spend some time deciding who is Chrissy and Jack and Janet. Oh my gosh, I remembered all three names.
Wow, you are older than me by like a year, but just enough. You were right at the age where you could remember their names. I just watched the show.
Yeah. All right. And the last question, as we wrap up, Pamela says she didn't realize that using a DX lens on the Z6 would give her only about a 4 megapixel image. Is that right? The Z6 is a 24 megapixel camera, and throwing a DX on only gives you 4? That sounds a little bit lower than I expect. I'm going to do a little research on that, Pam, and we'll talk a little bit more. But yes, you certainly are going to be losing a good bit as you crop in. Mm-hmm. It's not really worth it. You either should buy native lenses for the Z6 system, or beg or borrow some existing Nikon and use that adapter, which does pretty good. This does pretty good. All right. Well, chat room, thanks for hanging out with us. But David, thank you so much for jumping in. It was very last minute that I asked you, and I really appreciate that you set aside some time this afternoon. And spoiler, we had planned on you being here next week, which I think you'll still want to do. I should have asked you after the show.
Yeah, no, I totally want to do it. Awesome. Yeah, I had to give my family some heads up just to not, make too much noise. My son plays the drums all the time and guitar, and it's really loud in our house, and the dogs are barking and all that. So, but now that, we'll get the rhythm of this. No pun intended. There I go with the puns again. I made one earlier.
I saw that.
Yeah.
chat. I was only half listening, but
I do it all the time, and I don't mean to, you know. I just, but anyway, yeah, I've really enjoyed this, and you know, I cleaned up. I even exfoliated for this, you know, before. So, you know, I wanted to look great on this, you know, this tiny little camera that's on the top of my computer screen. But thank you so much for having me. I really enjoy it, and thanks to all of you for your encouragement and for your questions and letting me kind of come in and crash the party a little bit.
And David, if people are watching this and they're not already following you, where should they go to follow you and see your work? Where would you
Yeah,
like to
well,
send?
well, my Instagram is at David Carr, CARR underscore photo, at David Carr underscore photo. That's Instagram and Twitter. I don't do Twitter as much as I should. Facebook, I'm just David Carr, but I think there's like a million of us. So it's, you know, you might have to search David Carr third day.
I'll put links
But
right down below the video.
it's I'm there. And I've got a podcast that I started last year, and I'm ramping it back up. I actually have almost finished recording my first episode for this year, and I'm planning on posting it tomorrow. And that is just called the David Carr Podcast. And really creative name, but no, and it's just I just talk about photography. It's about 15 minutes, and just talking about what I'm thinking about, and kind of giving some tips and tricks here and there, you know. And it's not a visual thing, so it's kind of hard to talk about photography, but you know, it's something I'm trying to do, and so yeah, I encourage you guys to tune in.
Awesome. We'll put a link to that right down below. And David, I don't care if you're talking about pizza. Well, I like pizza, flowers. I don't know. You could talk about pretty much anything. Your mic setup and your voice. It's you just got some dulcet tones, and I love listening to it. So everybody should go check that
Thank
out.
you.
It really is kind of a general photography topics. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, it is general photography topics, and then me kind of just riffing a little bit here and there about, you know, the new episode that I'm about to upload is I'm talking about Antarctica a little bit, and talking about gear, and you know how what I actually talked about at the beginning of this is, you know, focusing so much on the gear and the technology, and sometimes forgetting the artistry side of it. And so I really like to talk about that a lot and encourage people to find that balance.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I hope people will check that out. And again, I'll put links to all of that right down below this video. And Roy just put it in chat along with his Instagram as well. And again, Roy, thanks for helping out in the chat. Hey, everybody, thank you so much. We're going to wrap it up. And David and I will see you again next week. Same time, same place. Bye-bye.
See you guys.